I never thought a night out with coworkers would end with him sleeping on my chest. But here we are, and honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So let me back up a bit. I work in marketing, and like most offices, we have that one guy everyone kind of likes, but nobody really knows that well. His name's Jamie. Tall, dark hair, always a little messy, like he rolled out of bed and into a meeting, but somehow effortlessly put together. He's like that calm eye in the storm of our chaotic team. We've had some brief chats here and there, mostly about work stuff or dumb jokes, but nothing that would make me think he'd crash on my couch after a night of too many drinks. It was Friday, and the whole team decided to hit this new bar downtown that just opened. I wasn't really in the mood to go, honestly. I'm more of a stay in and watch something kind of guy, but my boss was insisting, and everyone was planning to be there, so I figured why not? The bar was this dimly lit, cozy place with exposed brick walls and some kind of weird vintage jazz playing softly in the background. Perfect spot for deep conversations or just pretending you're in a movie. Jamie showed up right on time, which was already surprising because he's usually a little late or MIA. He had on one of those worn leather jackets that made him look like he walked straight out of a 90s indie film, and the minute he smiled at me, I swear I felt my chest tighten for a second. Totally unexpected and kind of embarrassing, but there it was. The night started off normal enough. Drinks, laughs, the usual office banter. But as the hours passed and the drinks piled up, Jamie got quieter, like he was fading into the background. Once I noticed that, I tried to check in with him a few times, but he just waved me off with this tired grin. By the time we decided to head back, he was clearly not in great shape, slurring a bit, stumbling just enough to be worrying, but still insisting he was fine. When we got to my place, he dropped his keys on the counter and collapsed onto my couch without even a thanks for tonight or anything. I was about to let him rest and maybe crash on the couch, but then he looked up at me with these blurry eyes and, without a word, shuffled over and curled up on my chest like it was the safest place in the world. Honestly, I froze for a second. Him, on me, like that, completely vulnerable and just there. I didn't know what to say or do, so I just sat there, letting him breathe against me. The whole room suddenly felt smaller, and for the first time, I saw him not as this distant, cool coworker, but as someone I genuinely wanted to know more about. That's where I'm sitting now, typing this out because I still can't believe how something so simple turned into something that feels way bigger than me. And honestly, I'm not sure what's next, but I kinda hope I get to find out. I'm not gonna lie, having Jamie lie on my chest was kinda surreal. I mean, we worked in the same office for months, shared the same jokes, and yet until that moment, I'd never seen that side of him. So unguarded, simple, and human. His breath was slow and steady, and for the first time, I noticed the way his hair smelled a little like that bar's weird mix of beer and pine, kind of comforting in a weird way. At first, I was just sitting there, trying not to move too much, not wanting to disturb him. The silence between us felt different. Not awkward, not heavy, but peaceful, like this was where he was meant to be, even if just for a couple of hours. I felt my heartbeat slow down, matching his calm breathing, and I couldn't help but wonder how the hell I hadn't noticed how much I liked being this close to him before. After a while, I started feeling a bit ridiculous. Here I was, a grown guy, worried about the fact that my coworker was passed out on my chest like a kid after a long day. So I lightly ran my fingers through his hair, the way I'd always wanted to but never had the guts to do. He shifted a little, mumbled something I couldn't quite catch, and then settled back in like he was comfortable. That's when I realized he trusted me, and honestly, that hit harder than I expected. Eventually, my phone buzzed on the coffee table, one of those group texts from work about some weekend plan. I glanced at it but didn't open the message. Jamie was still there, and nothing else seemed to matter right now. Instead, I just looked down at him, feeling this weird mix of protectiveness and hope. Was this some kind of weird starting point? I didn't know, but I wanted to find out. The night crept on, and eventually the alcohol wore off enough for him to stir. His eyes fluttered open, and for a second there was this flicker of confusion as if he didn't quite remember where he was or how he got there. Then his gaze landed on mine, and I saw this small, embarrassed smile spread across his face. "Hey," he said softly, his voice rough from all the drinking. "Hey," I replied, still feeling the warmth of him pressed against me. He blinked a few times, sitting up slowly and running his hands through his messy hair. "Thanks for letting me crash here. I, didn't really think I'd be this wasted." I laughed quietly. "Yeah, you really went all in tonight," he chuckled, then looked around my apartment like seeing it for the first time. "Nice place, by the way. Cozy." "Thanks," I said, shrugging. "It's nothing fancy, but it's mine." There was a beat of silence where I wasn't sure what to say next, so I just asked, "You feeling better?" "Better," he said, running a hand over his face. "I guess I needed a night like this. Honestly, I don't usually do the whole drinking thing, but tonight just felt different." "Curious," I pressed. "Different how?" He hesitated, then met my eyes again. "I guess, I don't know. It was nice to just let go for a bit. Work's been stressful, and I don't really have many people I can hang out with outside the office." That surprised me. Jamie was always so reserved, but hearing him talk like this made him seem more real, more approachable. "Well, you've got me now. I'm pretty good company, if I say so myself." He grinned, that easy, goofy grin that made me feel like maybe there was something more between us. "I might just take you up on that." We spent the next half hour just talking, really talking, about everything from our favorite movies to dumb childhood stories. It was the kind of conversation that skips all the usual small talk and jumps straight to the parts that matter. By the time he got up to leave, I realized I was already thinking about the next time I'd see him, maybe even inviting him over without the whole emergency drunk scenario as an excuse. When he paused at the door and looked back at me, there was this quiet, almost shy moment where I thought maybe he was going to say something more. But instead, he just smiled and said, "Thanks again for everything." "Anytime," I said, watching him disappear down the hall, feeling a warmth settle deep in my chest. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, the echo of his presence still lingering. Who knew a random Friday night and a drunk coworker sleeping on my chest would turn into something that felt like the beginning of a story I actually wanted to tell? The next morning, I woke up to sunlight filtering through the blinds, the kind of soft light that makes you want to stay in bed just a little longer. My phone was buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. Groaning, I grabbed it, expecting a million work emails or some dumb notification. But it wasn't. It was a message from Jamie. "Thanks for last night. Coffee on me next time?" I stared at the screen for a few seconds, a goofy smile spreading across my face. Coffee on him didn't sound like a bad idea at all. I replied almost immediately, "Deal." That small exchange was the beginning of something that didn't feel like just a casual office friendship anymore. Over the next few days, Jamie and I started texting a bit more than usual. Nothing heavy, mostly funny memes, and some light banter about how brutal the week was treating us. But with each message, I felt like I was peeling back layers of this guy, the first thought I already knew. One afternoon, Jamie invited me out after work, not for drinks, but for a walk in the park near the office. I remember feeling a little nervous, like maybe this was a date, but I didn't want to label it yet. We met at the park entrance, and right away he looked different, more relaxed, like he was shedding some invisible armor. We walked side by side, the city's chaos fading behind the trees and open space. Jamie talked about his family, about how he'd moved here a few years ago chasing a job and a quiet life. He mentioned how hard it was sometimes to find genuine connections when everyone's always in a rush, always guarded. Listening to him, I realized how lucky I was to be part of this small bubble of honesty growing between us. I shared some stories too, the awkward dates, the times I'd felt invisible even in a room full of people. Somewhere between the stories and the laughter, I felt that pull again, the same one from that night when he was asleep on my chest. It was like I'd been waiting for this moment without even knowing. When we reached a bench overlooking the little pond, Jamie stopped and looked out at the ducks gliding across the water. Then, almost shyly, he turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about what it'd be like if things were different? Like if we weren't just coworkers?" I swallowed hard. My heart was thudding like it wanted to burst out of my chest. Yeah, I admitted. More than I probably should. He smiled, that same goofy grin, but there was something softer in his eyes now. Me too. For a moment, we just stood there, the city humming quietly around us, and I wondered if this was what people meant when they talked about the start of something real. After that day, we started hanging out more often, sometimes just grabbing coffee, sometimes catching dinner after work. It was easy, like we were just two guys who happened to click in a way that felt natural. And with every conversation, every shared laugh, I found myself wanting more. One night, a couple of weeks after Jamie had crashed on my couch, we ended up at my place again. This time, there was no alcohol involved. Just a quiet evening with some music and takeout. We were sitting on the couch, and I found myself inches away from him, the air between us thick with something neither of us dared to name yet. Jamie looked at me, his eyes holding that same vulnerability from the night he'd fallen asleep against me. "Can I ask you something?" he said softly. "Anything," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, then cleared his throat. "Do you think we could be more than just friends? Because, if I'm honest, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night." My breath hitched. I'd been wrestling with the same feelings, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel so much more real. I reached out slowly, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "I think I'd like that." There was this electric charge in the air, like the world shifted just enough to make space for something new between us. And then, without overthinking it, I leaned in, closing the distance, and kissed him. It wasn't perfect or flashy. It was quiet, tentative, and full of all the awkward uncertainty and excitement that comes with something new and real. When we finally pulled away, Jamie smiled with that same shy grin, and I knew this was just the beginning. Looking back, it's kind of crazy how a night that started with him, passed out on my chest, turned into this whole new chapter I never saw coming. Sometimes, life throws you these moments that shake everything up, and all you can do is hold on and hope they lead you somewhere good. For me, this was one of those moments. And honestly, I'm glad I didn't let it slip away. After that first kiss, everything felt like it was both moving at lightning speed and yet somehow slow enough for me to actually process what was happening. It was surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body, wondering how a simple Friday night hangout had turned into this whatever it was now. Jamie stayed over that night. We didn't do anything wild or dramatic, just lay there, tangled up under my blankets, talking about the future in a way that wasn't scary or forced. For once, I felt safe, admitting I wasn't sure what I wanted exactly, but that I wanted to figure it out with him. The next morning was awkward in the best way possible. We both woke up with that kind of quiet smile on our faces, the kind you get when you've crossed some invisible line but aren't ready to shout about it from the rooftops. I made us coffee, and we sat in my small kitchen, sipping and stealing glances that needed no words. So, Jamie started, scratching the back of his neck like he was nervous. How do we do this? I mean, not just be coworkers who hang out, but, I liked how real he was being. No games, no pretending. I don't know, maybe just take it one day at a time? See where it goes without overthinking every step. He nodded, looking relieved. Yeah, one day at a time sounds good. That week at work was interesting, to say the least. Suddenly, I was hyper-aware of Jamie whenever he was around, noticing the little things. The way he laughed, how his eyes crinkled at the corners, the way he tucked his hair behind his ear when he was concentrating. It was like seeing him in high definition for the first time. We kept things pretty low-key, not wanting to make a big deal in the office, but there were these small moments, a shared look across the conference room, a quick text during a break, a subtle brush of hands that made my stomach do little flips. I was falling for him harder than I expected, and honestly, it scared me a bit. One night, a couple weeks later, Jamie invited me over for dinner. He cooked, which was a surprise because I'd only ever seen him survive on coffee and whatever was quick and easy. When I arrived, his apartment was cozy and filled with little touches that showed a side of him I hadn't seen before. Photos of some trips he'd taken, books piled on the shelves, a record player in the corner. We ate pasta, drank wine, and talked about everything and nothing. Then, out of nowhere, he reached across the table and took my hand. "I know we're still figuring this out," he said softly, but I want you to know I'm serious about this. About us. My heart skipped. Me too, I said without hesitation. After dinner, we moved to his couch, and that's when things got a little more vulnerable. Jamie opened up about his past relationships, how he'd always been cautious, never wanting to get hurt, and how that fear sometimes kept him from really connecting. I told him about my own guard, how I'd learned to hide parts of myself to avoid disappointment. There was this moment where we just looked at each other, understanding that we were both scared but willing to take a chance anyway. It was one of those quiet, perfect moments that stay with you long after the night ends. As the weeks went by, our relationship settled into a comfortable rhythm. We weren't in any rush to label everything or define it, but every day felt like a new discovery. We'd grab lunch between meetings, sneak quick texts when things got hectic, and sometimes, when the office was empty, share a secret smile that said more than words ever could. One afternoon, we were working late at the office, the building mostly empty except for the soft hum of computers. Jamie was sitting across from me, focused on his screen, when he suddenly looked up. "Hey," he said, voice low. I looked over and he smiled that lopsided grin I'd come to love. "Do you want to grab dinner? Like, now?" I didn't have to think about it. Absolutely. That night, as we walked through the city streets, the air crisp and filled with the scent of rain, I realized something. This wasn't just a fling or a casual thing anymore. Jamie had become a part of my life in a way that felt deep and real. I glanced over at him, and he caught my eye, giving me a knowing smile. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said honestly. "Better than okay." And maybe that's the thing about unexpected moments, like a drunk guy falling asleep on your chest. They can turn into the most important parts of your story if you let them. With Jamie, I was finally ready to see where this could go, no matter how uncertain it felt. Because sometimes, the best things happen when you least expect them. After that night, things between Jamie and me felt like they were on a new level, comfortable but charged with this undercurrent that neither of us was rushing to name, but both of us could feel. It wasn't like the movies, where everything goes from 0 to 100 and you know exactly what's happening. No, this was way more subtle and messy in the best way. We started spending more weekends together, sometimes just grabbing brunch, other times wandering through the city's random little neighborhoods neither of us had explored. I was surprised by how easy it was to talk to him about anything, from dumb pop culture stuff to the weird doubts that creep up when you're trying to figure out what you want from life. One Sunday afternoon, we ended up at this tiny bookstore tucked away in an alley that smelled like old paper and coffee. Jamie was flipping through a worn copy of some poetry book when he looked up at me and said, "You know, I never thought I'd be the type to get all mushy about books or, well, people." I laughed. "Yeah? What changed?" He shrugged, that half smile playing on his lips. "Maybe meeting you." I felt my face heat up and looked away, pretending to check out the shelves. The whole moment felt like one of those rare little sparks that remind you how much someone can start to mean to you without any dramatic declarations. But of course, nothing stays simple forever. About a month into whatever we were building, things got complicated. Office gossip. It started with a few sideways glances in the break room, then some whispered conversations that I caught out of the corner of my ear. I don't think either of us had planned on making things public, but apparently, the way we looked at each other was obvious enough for people to notice. One afternoon, Jamie's usually chill demeanor snapped. He was sitting across from me in one of those glass-walled meeting rooms, staring at his laptop but clearly not focused. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, no. Doesn't feel right that people can't just keep their noses out of it. It's like suddenly I'm a character in some office drama." I nodded, feeling that same frustration. "I get it, but maybe we just need to give it time. People will get used to it." He looked up then, meeting my eyes with something fierce. "I don't want to hide, though. I want to be able to be me, with you, without it being a thing." That hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I'd been tiptoeing around the whole idea of us being out at work. "Me too," I said quietly. "Maybe we should talk to HR. See what options we have." Jamie nodded slowly, and for the first time in a while, I saw that old fire in him, the one that made me fall for him in the first place. The next week, we did just that. Sitting in a sterile office with a HR representative wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. We explained our relationship, our concerns, and the representative was surprisingly supportive, assuring us that the company had a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and would handle any issues discreetly. That didn't solve everything overnight, but it made me feel like we were taking control rather than just waiting for things to blow up in our faces. Back at our desks, small things started to shift. Some coworkers were awkward at first, but most were either supportive or indifferent. The whispers died down, and I started to relax into the idea that Jamie and I could be open without it affecting our work or who we were. One evening, after a particularly rough day, Jamie called me out of the blue. "Can you come over? I kinda need to see you." I didn't hesitate. When I got to his place, he was sitting on the couch, looking worn out but managing a small smile when he saw me. We spent the night just lying there, talking about the pressures of hiding and the relief of being honest. At some point, Jamie reached over and took my hand. "I'm tired," he said, voice soft but steady. "Tired of pretending, tired of worrying about what people think. But with you, I feel like I can be myself." I squeezed his hand back, feeling this wave of emotion I couldn't quite put into words. "We'll figure it out together." That night, as he fell asleep beside me, I realized how much I'd come to rely on him. Not just for the easy laughs or the quiet moments, but for the courage to be real in a world that sometimes felt too fake. Our relationship wasn't perfect. We had our awkward moments, our disagreements, and the occasional bout of insecurity. But every time I looked at Jamie, especially in those quiet moments when the city noise faded away, I knew this was something worth fighting for. One late Friday, a couple of months after that first night he crashed on my couch, we found ourselves sitting on my balcony, wine glasses in hand, watching the city lights flicker below. Jamie leaned his head on my shoulder and said, "You know, I never thought a stupid night of drinking would lead to this." I smiled, wrapping an arm around him. "Neither did I, but I'm really glad it did." He looked up at me, eyes shining in the moonlight. "Me too." And in that moment, I realized that sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them. And all it takes is one night, one person, and a little bit of courage to change everything. That night on the balcony stayed with me for days. The way Jamie rested against me like he belonged there, the quiet hum of the city beneath us, the easy rhythm of our conversation that didn't need to fill every silence. But as comforting as that moment was, life, of course, has a way of throwing curveballs just when you think you're settled. A week later, I noticed Jamie seemed more distracted at work, distant even. At first, I chalked it up to a busy week, or maybe some leftover stress. But then he started canceling our plans, replying slowly to texts, and avoiding the little touches and glances we'd become used to. I didn't want to push him, but the silence started to worry me. One Thursday evening, I decided to check in. I got off work a bit earlier and swung by his place unannounced. A move totally out of character for me, but I needed to see him, to know what was going on. He opened the door, looking tired, like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were a little red around the edges, and he didn't smile like he usually did. "Hey," I said softly. "Hey," he replied, stepping aside to let me in. We sat on his couch in silence for a bit, the kind of heavy silence that feels like it's holding something unsaid. Finally, Jamie sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry I've been distant," he said. "Work's been a nightmare lately. There's this project that's eating up all my time and energy. I'm trying not to let it affect us, but I guess I'm not doing a great job." I reached out and took his hand. "You don't have to apologize. I get it. But maybe you should let me in a little more? We're in this together." He looked at me then, vulnerability flashing across his face. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared that if I'm not perfect at everything, you might, I don't know, lose interest." That hit me hard, because the truth was, Jamie didn't have to be perfect. I liked him for all his messy, complicated parts, the ones he was afraid to show. "Jamie," I said, squeezing his hand gently, "I'm here because of you. Not some idea of perfection. You don't have to hide any part of yourself from me." He smiled, a small but genuine smile, and leaned in to rest his head on my shoulder. "Thanks. I needed to hear that." From that night on, things slowly started to balance out. Jamie opened up more about his work pressures, and I did my best to be there for him, even if it was just to listen or to make him laugh when he was overwhelmed. And honestly, it brought us closer. There's something about sharing the hard stuff that builds a foundation stronger than just good times. One weekend, we decided to take a break from the city and escape to the countryside. Neither of us had done much of that before, and I was a little nervous about how it would go, spending that much time with just each other, no distractions. But it was perfect. We rented a small cabin by a lake, surrounded by trees that were just starting to turn gold with the season. There were no screens, no emails, just the sound of leaves rustling and the occasional bird call. On the first morning, we woke up to the sun pouring through the windows, and Jamie made coffee while I cooked breakfast. We ate outside on the porch, the cool air crisp and refreshing. Afterwards, we took a long hike through the woods. At one point, Jamie slipped on a patch of wet leaves and almost fell, but I caught him just in time. We laughed so hard that my sides hurt, and for the first time in weeks, I felt completely at peace. That night, we sat by a campfire, wrapped in a blanket, and talked about everything. Our hopes, fears, the kind of future we wanted. Jamie admitted he'd been scared to let me in that deeply before, but that being with me made him want to try. I told him I felt the same, that this wasn't some fleeting thing, but something I wanted to build, no matter how uncertain it got. The next morning, as we packed up to head back, Jamie pulled me aside, his hands trembling just a little. "I don't want to lose what we have," he said quietly. "I want to keep building this. With you," I smiled, pulling him into a tight hug. "Me too. We're in this together." Back in the city, life was still messy, still unpredictable, but with Jamie by my side, it felt manageable. Sure, there were days when work was stressful or when we'd disagree over something silly, but every night we came back to each other, and that made all the difference. One evening, a few months later, Jamie showed up at my door holding a small box. His eyes were shining with that mixture of nervousness and hope. "I've been thinking about this for a while," he said, handing me the box. Inside was a simple silver ring. Not flashy, just elegant. "Will you move in with me?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I felt my heart catch in my throat. "Yes," I said, smiling so wide I thought my face might crack. "Absolutely." As we stood there, the city lights twinkling behind us, I realized just how far we'd come, from that night when he'd fallen asleep on my chest, to this moment that felt like a new beginning. Sometimes, love sneaks up on you in the most unexpected ways, and when it does, you just have to hold on tight and see where it takes you. For me, that journey started with a drunk guy finding comfort on my chest, and it's turned into the best thing I never saw coming. Moving in together felt like the natural next step, but also like a quiet promise we made to each other without shouting it from the rooftops. The days that followed were filled with small moments. Jamie's coffee brewing in the morning while I scrambled eggs, our mismatched furniture coming together in a way that somehow felt like home, and those late-night talks where we'd lie tangled up, sharing hopes and fears like old friends. There wasn't some dramatic declaration or grand gesture. It was just us, figuring it out side by side. I loved the way Jamie would sneak into the kitchen in the middle of the night to make tea, careful not to wake me, or how I'd find him sitting on the balcony, staring out at the city with that thoughtful look he gets when he's lost in his own world. One evening, a few months after we'd moved in, we found ourselves on that same balcony where so much had begun. The city lights stretched out beneath us, buzzing softly with life. Jamie leaned into me, resting his head on my shoulder, and we sat in comfortable silence. "You know," he said after a while, "I never expected any of this. Me, with you. It's better than I thought it could be." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "Me too. It's not perfect, but it's ours." He looked up at me then, eyes shining in the soft light. "Thanks for that night, by the way, when I crashed on your couch. I was a mess, but you didn't run." I laughed quietly. "Well, you pretty much invaded my personal space, so running wasn't really an option." He grinned, then grew serious. "You gave me a safe place when I didn't have one. I'm grateful for that every day." I squeezed his hand gently. We both needed that, I think. And look where it got us. That night, as we headed inside, I realized how much had changed since that first unexpected moment. Jamie wasn't just a coworker or a guy the first casually liked anymore. He was the person I wanted to share my life with, the one who made the messy parts easier and the good parts even better. It's funny how life works sometimes. You never know when a simple act, like someone falling asleep on your chest after a drunken night, can turn into something real and lasting. Love, I've learned, isn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It's about those quiet, honest moments where two people choose to be vulnerable and trust each other. And as I look at Jamie now, I'm reminded that sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them.